Welcome, everyone. FutureStack 2022. Thank you for joining us today. Stefan and I are very excited to be here in Vegas, all the way from Toronto, Canada. We will be discussing what we have done with New Relic and Istio, and how Achiever's SRE team solve common problems for our developers.
Hi everyone, I'm Stefan Kolesnikovich. I've been with Achievers for about 3 years now. I'm a principal site reliability engineer. Previously, I worked at Instacart, working on their Kubernetes platform before joining Achievers. And now at Achievers, I focus mostly on our monolith to microservice journey, working on Kubernetes, Istio, IDPs, all of that fun stuff. And this is Steve.
I'm Steve Griffin, aka Griff. I am a principal architect and the SRE manager at Achievers. I've been with Achievers for over 9.5 years. When I started, there was just me and the only system admin working with 30 developers, and we had quarterly release parties, merch parties, and we always had to take the platform down to do it. Those were fun times. And my main focus mostly is on data stores and managing the SRE team, and of course, observability. We have an awesome SRE team at Achievers. Many of us on the team have worked together for over 13 years in different companies. And it really helps make our team stronger and great communication. I know we have some of our clients here today, but if you're not familiar with what we do, Achievers is an employee voice and recognition platform that builds engagement and sustainable performance in organizations. We use data and recognition to improve our clients' employee experience and culture. That's one of our main objectives. Through recognition, employees can earn points that can be used in our global marketplace, where you can basically redeem for anything. You name it, we have it. We have around 110 developers, and the team is constantly growing. Currently, our platform is global. We have 3 regions in GCP, and we have 2 physical data centers, which I can't wait for them to go away. We have been going through the migration from a monolith to microservices over the last few years. We currently run 60 microservices in production, and over 100 are in development, ready to be deployed to production in the next few months. Achievers has been a customer of New Relic for over 9 years now. Our microservice journey began around the same time New Relic 1 started trickling out. The team is extremely excited about our partnership and how we have grown with New Relic over the years.
Before we get started in how to solve problems with all of the data that we have from Istio, let's do a quick review of how Achievers uses Istio. There's so many metrics that come out of the box, but what do you do with all of that data? How many people in the audience here actually use Istio today? Anybody? A couple people? Great. How about across region? Anybody use multi-region? At Achievers, we use multi-region. We're in 3 regions around the world, and we have all of this data getting passed between regions. We use service-to-service communication through Istio. We use authentication and authorization through Istio, and we also leverage a lot of load balancing options, network policies. Basically everything that Istio has, we try to use it as much as possible. Also, we do heavily rely on logs, metrics, and tracing within Istio itself. We use Istio in a multi-region service mesh. The mesh scales across our regions, and we use Prometheus to generate metrics for all of our services. We learned a lot when introducing Istio into our platform, often around distributed systems and observability. Luckily, we had New Relic there to consolidate all of this data for us into a single pane of glass. It's helped us better understand our applications and what they're doing across region or even within a single cluster. We leverage the locality feature, which allows us to fail over to another region if a service fails, or handle capacity overload by sending that extra load over to another region.
What can we do to solve problems for our developers? Engineers know the status of their service at all times, so they need to use New Relic every day in some sort of capacity. The SRE team wanted this to be easy for engineers, to get started in production as quickly as possible and not to be the blocker. Also, the team wanted to bring the product owners, engineers closer together by sharing the responsibility of reliability. Lastly, we needed to gain confidence in the code that we roll out. Every deployment introduced a risk, and our goal was to mitigate that risk with the introduction of canary deployment, analysis in production.
So from a show of hands here, how many people get a little overwhelmed when looking at metrics for the first time? Anybody? A few people? I definitely do. I get very overwhelmed. I don't know what to do with all of this data because there's so much. Sometimes I don't know what to do with that data, and often it's hard to make sense of what you can do with the data. Running in a single region brings a lot of metrics, but we're in 3. So we really need to consolidate things to make more sense of that data. It also adds extra complexity around things like deployments, traffic routing, and data. Using New Relic, we're able to consolidate all of our Istio data into that single pane of glass.
These are the Prometheus metrics out of the box with Istio. While there are a few more of these are the main ones that we use. With these metrics, we can measure traffic, error, rate, latency, and connection bytes for each cluster and namespace. You may not want to send all your metrics to New Relic. We learned that the hard way, and it can be very costly. We found it useful to send. We find it useful to only send what you need. Being in these regions, having all these metrics, increased our metric volume significantly. That's a long story, but it was bad. All these metrics are turned on by default in Istio. At the beginning, we sent way too many metrics to New Relic and realized we didn't need them all. Do not turn off your metrics that you're not using. Just hold them locally within your cluster for troubleshooting. You can still use Istio's built-in observability, looking for troubleshooting within the cluster. It may not be required in a central location, and it will save on a lot of cost.
Great. So we've now spoken about the metric buckets that you can use to solve problems. But now we need to sort through that data and make sense of it all and figure out what we need to monitor and alert on. If you enable locality failover, you need to understand what's going on upstream and downstream, but also across regions. Filters are an easy way to do this. You can narrow down your query to see communication between your Istio proxies, services, or even your clusters. These are just a few of the metrics and filters we use quite often. Now this is a simple example. If you're looking to see the requests per second on your production cluster, you can use the above query to see throughput going through your cluster. Perfectly fine if you have one cluster. But if you're going global, like we are, you're gonna have more than one cluster, and you may need to filter or monitor on a per service or a per cluster basis. Using the exact same query, with the addition of a facet, you're able to narrow down issues to your specific cluster, region, or even a Kubernetes namespace. Again, this is a very simple example. But with cross-regional traffic, it becomes a lot more complex, especially for tracing. In our Istio setup, we fail over and handle capacity overload by using the Istio locality feature. We want to track cross-region traffic when we see regions seeing issues, or we might see abnormal latency. This diagram is a great example of that, where you can see our source cluster and a destination cluster going across the world, basically, to serve the request. Latency is a great metric to also track in Istio. The team monitors not only service latency, but cross-cluster latency as well. You could use a similar query to what we have up here to review the throughput divergence that's happening across your services and your clusters.
Now we have all this data in New Relic. How can we get started for solving problems for developers? Since we migrated from monolithic to microservices, there's been a big change for our engineers. The development team holds much more responsibility today. Write code, reliability, being responsible for the service in production, and being on call. The SRE team didn't want to be the blocker for developers to move quickly, and to find a way to allow developers to be unblocked by doing it themselves. Engineers need to understand where to get started in monitoring their services. This was a pretty obvious starting point for us at the SRE team.
A lot of configuration is needed when moving to microservices. You have more repos, you have more tooling, you have more configuration. It's also very distributed. Now, I'm not going to go into this too much because the talk's not about this, but this is our internal developer platform named Abattoir. We wanted to treat our clusters more like cattle and not pets. So that's the name. It is our self-service tooling for all of our engineers. Engineers can create their whole microservice using this tool. It includes a wide range of features out of the box for them, including all of the Istio resources they might need, overrides for anything that they might need, default alerts and dashboards, which we'll touch on more in a second, custom alerting and dashboards, SLO management, and Canary configuration details for Canary deployments. Also much, much more. That's just kind of focused on this talk. If you want to see more information on Abattoir, though, you could visit achievers.engineering. We have a blog and we talk more about that. So if you're interested, give it a check. Often teams are unaware where to begin when they start writing a microservice for the first time, especially if it's a new team. They don't know where to start. They don't know what to alert on. We wanted to speed that up for teams by giving them sensible defaults for things like alerts and dashboarding. This way, they're able to move a lot quicker without having to worry about writing individual alerts for all of their services.
We base a lot of the default alerts for developers around the 4 golden signals. We tried to avoid cascading failures. We came up with a standard set of alerts focused around the 4 golden signals. Engineering services and owners can configure custom alerts also. But we have the set of sensible defaults engineers can also choose from. Often teams don't know where to start, but they have to put a service into production for the first time. These default alerts help us move quickly and safely. New Relic Suite has grown a lot since we first started with NR. There are a list of There are a list of the main tools which engineers use every day: logs, distributed tracing. APM is fundamental. We really like NRQL. We're heavy users. Creating custom metrics, being able to query and build alerts off that, we use it every day to get deeper understanding of the data by widening our query, or often tweaking a query on a dashboard to see a little bit more information. But we needed a way to put this all together in a central location and help quickly bootstrap teams moving to production.
Same goes for being on call for the first time. Being on call is pretty new to our engineers in the last little bit, maybe the last year or so. And we wanted engineers to have a great starting point to review their services inputs and outputs. If you get paged in the middle of the night, you don't want to be scrambling to solve your problem. You want to go somewhere and see the problem direct in your face. We put together automation to create default dashboards for all of our microservices. Each service owner can create default dashboards along with custom dashboards for anything that they might need for their microservice. We set a lot of defaults based on the 4 golden signals for them, and some custom stuff that Achievers adds in there as well. You can see from this diagram, we have a lot of stuff that's being showed. You can't see it too great on here, but there's also an Istio tab up at the top. So we have a whole wide range of Istio graphics and charts to show everyone what's happening in their service through Istio. We can build upon this by adding more custom graphs as well. Engineers can easily tweak what we put forward for them in the default dashboards by adding anything custom through Abattoir. This query represents throughput divergence and to see the rate of traffic going in and out of your namespace. Being able to visually represent this to teams and help engineers communicate better to product owners. Having these dashboards allows them to show things to non-technical people to maybe show if there's a problem that they need to address in maintenance instead of working on a feature instead. Alerting is also done the exact same way. Everything is based off of NRQL. All of our engineers need to know NRQL because they use it every day. The default dashboards are a great starting point to find out a query to their problem, and they might have to just tweak a couple of values from there. It is critical to their success that they know and understand how to use New Relic. The addition of having these sensible defaults that we put forward also really helps speed up engineers and give them the power to do everything that they need to through the self-service tooling.
Since moving to a distributed system in regions across the world and splitting our monolith to microservices, the SRE team can't be the only people that pay attention when things go wrong. In the past, when things broke on a monolithic application, it was mostly SRE team fixing the issues. We wanted to expand that to developers, product owners, and of course, still the SRE team. What we were trying to solve. Adopting SLOs has been great for Achievers. It will help bring product owners, development closer together, better planning for technical debt, because everyone understands the impact of bugs or performance issues when representing clearly in a number. Everyone owns reliability. New Relic is a great place to collect and display SLOs to all these service owners. Not only engineers can benefit from using the service level management tool in New Relic, we reviewed with product teams and even our management teams, weekly and bi-weekly basis. And lastly, using Istio allows you to bring your SLI closer to the user to get a more accurate result. If you just rely strictly on APM, you are limiting your monitoring application errors. You may miss some. Using Istio allows for network level responses, which should be closer to your client making the call.
As Steve mentioned, bringing that SLO closer to the end user is very important when you create SLOs because you want it to represent what the client or the user is actually seeing. APM is only in the application layer, so you may miss errors. And I actually have an example of that upcoming. We start off with 2 SLOs for teams to choose from. Some services are more availability heavy, some are more latency heavy. We don't want to overload them when they're going into production for the first time, so they can kind of choose whatever fits their objective best. But we're still missing that tool to visualize it and see and share this information with product owners. Luckily, New Relic had that tool for us. With the introduction of service level management, we were very excited to jump on the beta for this tool. It is exactly what we needed.
We set up most teams with an availability SLO to start with. These dashboards in SLM are a great way to visually explain the impact, bugs, or issues. This is something we can review on a regular basis with all product owners to help them understand the impact of focusing on a new feature instead of fixing backlog items to improve reliability. Latency is the next SLO we introduce to our teams. This is to gain confidence with any slowdown in processing or responses. We embrace eventually consistency on our platform, but how long is too long? These SLOs help us track when something is just too slow. If traffic has failed over to another region on a service, this also would impact our performance.
Achievers really cares about the developer experience. We want our engineers to enjoy the tools that they use every day. The SRE team wanted to make managing your SLO as easy as possible for our engineers and service owners. We integrated SLOs into our developer self-service tooling, which developers are already familiar with today. Teams can easily define SLOs for latency or availability, depending on what they need, all in YAML through the Abattoir framework. If the values need updating at any time after discussions with the product owner, you can easily submit a PR and push it up to Abattoir, and it'll just automatically update the service level management UI. It was important for us to also have sensible defaults here when we're talking about SLOs. Often teams don't know where to get started. What's a good SLO for my service? I don't know, I'm just writing code for the first time. So we wanted to give them these sensible defaults that they could take advantage of to move into production without waiting on someone to make that call for them. These numbers are things that can change over time. So it doesn't mean that you have to have them written in stone off the bat. I also recommend setting up some alerts to go along with your error budget depletion. This will help spot issues a little bit more ahead of time than too late. The SRE team also reviews the SLIs that service teams have on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, depending on the team. One day, one developer pointed out they were seeing a large depletion in their SLI, and over the past couple of weeks, they started to see other problems. They needed some help troubleshooting the issue from the SRE team. Initial investigation started with the default dashboard. As we mentioned before, our default dashboards have a lot of useful information. It's a great starting point to see what's happening and what you can monitor on your service. Even if the dashboard doesn't show something directly, it gives engineers the great examples of queries they can tailor to their exact needs. We could see a lot of 503 errors coming in through the Istio proxy and noticed a pattern of them happening frequently in the recent weeks. 503s are the Istio blanket error. Has anyone ran into them here in the audience? Anybody 503s? No? A little bit? A little bit. They are very difficult to troubleshoot. Because they're this blanket error, many issues can be the cause of this error, and it's very difficult to narrow down. We ended up finding a memory leak, and logs showed Node.js memory heap being exceeded. Although our Kubernetes memory limits were pretty high, we didn't see any OOMs or out of memory errors. We did get to track down this memory leak and finally resolve it. But that didn't solve this problem. We continued to see 503s, but often during deployments, scaling up or down, or during a container restart. The 503s still persisted. Looking at New Relic logs for more information, it was apparent 503s were still continuing to happen. Searching in the logs for upstream errors allowed us to correlate these restarts to a deployment scaling up or down, or the restart of this container that I was talking about. Tweaking Kubernetes values was an option to give more time to drain connections, but something else was still happening that was holding on to those connections and being severed prematurely. More Googling turned up a fault in Node.js apps and Kubernetes. Not sure if anyone has had this problem before, but it's very interesting, so check your Node.js apps. Node.js applications do not natively handle sigterm signals to child processes. If you're running Node through NPM, for example, that's going to fork processes, and sigterm from Kubernetes will never get passed down. Any connections in flight to your web server will be severed, and you will end up seeing an upstream error and a 503. Adding this block of code to the Node.js app, along with adding a proper init process, allowed for the sigterms to finally be passed down to the child process, and it resolved our issue.
At this point, we have made two major changes to resolve the 503s. Solving restarts due to a recent added memory leak, and then the longer-term issue regarding sigterm. Eventually, the SLI returned back to normal. A mix of the Istio default dashboards and SLM help us track down these issues. Using the network layer will also bring errors to light, which APM may not catch. Overall, engineers, product owners now have better tools and understanding around reliability, which allows for better planning to drive maintenance and feature development. No environment acts the same way production is. Canary deployments help gain confidence in the code we roll out. It also mitigates code deployments from introducing failures into the steady state of the platform.
Anyone use Canary deployments? A couple people? If you're not familiar with what a Canary deployment is, it's basically sending a percentage of your traffic to a new version of your code with the old version still staying around, and then hopefully you do some sort of analysis on that traffic to see if it's introduced any problems to your infrastructure. As Steve mentioned before, you have a steady state, and anytime you do a deployment, you could be adding risk to that steady state. Canaries helps gain that confidence, and sometimes even allows you to automatically roll back if you see problems. We have been using Argo CD at Achievers for the past few years to handle our distributed system deployments, mostly embracing the GitOps feature and the app-of-app patterns in Argo. The SRE team decided to build upon the system and add New Relic to query Istio data for Canary deployments. Argo CD rollouts allows a way for us to perform analysis and to speed up delivery time to production. New Relic allows us to consolidate production data to confirm that we're healthy in all regions while reducing the introduction of errors, latency, or any of the 4 golden signals that we monitor for. All of these problems are all available to monitor through Istio metrics.
We had a few requirements we wanted to address with Canary deployments. Sometimes people are scared to test in production. I am one of those. But no environment is anything like production. No matter how hard you try, it's difficult, if not impossible, to simulate your client's traffic. Traffic-based routing is also a great option in Istio to do network-based balancing between your pods. You can use replica-based canaries also, but network-based can give you more granularity. Consolidated analysis is us treating a single app as one entity across all regions. One app globally and not one app per region. Any deployment into production introduces risk from the steady state of our platform, as long as errors don't breach the SLO.
As Steve mentioned, consolidating data across regions was very important. We treat our microservices as a layer. They're not one service over here in North America, one in Europe. It's a layer. The idea was to have a single query globally instead of a per individual region query. An Achiever's microservice is a global entity, as I mentioned, a layer. Consolidating Canary analysis gives you a smaller blast radius if a deployment was to go bad in any region. To query New Relic, we use the Argo CD and New Relic integration for our Canary deployments. This tool uses the GraphQL endpoint and basically writes an NRQL query that you're able to hit New Relic and get the response back pretty quickly. We have a whole library of these Canary analysis templates that engineers can choose from. Again, it's built into our abattoir system, so engineers need one for Apollo in this example, they can use this one. If it doesn't meet their needs within passing different arguments, they can write their own, and Argo CD will just deploy a new template that they're able to use. It's all self-serve. We deploy all of this configuration through the Argo CD app of apps pattern. We query our consolidated Istio entity with an NRQL query to check the success rate of our applications. For this, you can use Istio or you can use APM depending on your needs, as long as you're getting those 4 golden signals. I also suggest going back to using Istio where you can, because you will get that number closer to your client. As I was mentioning before about the 503 errors, those never showed up in APM because that's only application-based errors, not network-based errors. On top of analysis, you can make Istio do traffic shaping based on your Canary deployments. One thing we should also note is if you're turning on these canaries in environments that don't see regular traffic, say if you want to turn it on in a UAT or a staging environment, you can absolutely do that. But if you're not seeing regular traffic, you will get inconsistent or a failed canary because you're not seeing that constant traffic.
On our monolith, if bad code is rolled out, we often would have to do a rollback with interruption. the SRE team didn't have a great way to deploy with confidence. The introduction of some of the tooling with New Relic and integrations with Argo CD have sped up our Canary onboarding process, continuing our theme of great developer experience. Since moving to Canary deployments, we now have better automation around rolling back changes and monitoring after the introduction of new code. Overall, Canaries have greatly helped us reduce the risk to our platform.
So let's do a quick little overview here. New Relic is really, really powerful. You all know, you're all here, you've all seen it. But it's also helped us in a lot of ways to solve these problems that we have for our engineers. Being in this large distributed platform that we are across regions brings all of this extra complexity, and we really needed a tool to bring it all together and make sense for us, which was New Relic. Engineers are now responsible for their code all the way through production. They need the tools to do their job effectively, and it's the SRE team's job at Achievers to make sure the developer experience is great. Istio, alongside New Relic, helps solve some of these complexities by allowing us to consolidate data for Canary deployments, SLO, management, everyday observability, and overall developer experience.
We, the SRE team, need to make this easier for engineers, often using sensible defaults to speed up time to production and time to resolve. Reliability is now owned by everyone. We can use SLM to help share this data with stakeholders outside engineering. Being a customer for over 9 years, we really have been able to grow with New Relic. Our success in observability is a testament to the great partnership we have with New Relic. We are hiring. We're hiring for lots of positions, all different departments. So if you're interested in cool technology, great work-life balance, great culture, please check out www.achievers.com and give it a look. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Before we open for questions, we also have an engineering blog at achievers.engineering. If you want more information on our Istio journey, there's a part 1 already up there, and I'm writing part 2 right now, which is more about this kind of stuff and observability. So it'll be touching on more of this talk, basically, in more detail. Please feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you guys. Please give us any feedback on the talk and any questions. Yes, so we actually are waiting, I think it was even announced this week, there's some open telemetry integrations that you can have to bring in those traces into New Relic. We were working with somebody from New Relic on this at one point, but it brings more complexity for us to get it working because we're in 3 regions and we consolidate everything into a single Istio entity for those 3 regions. It works today out of the box for a single region, but not for us for the 3 regions. So I think you can leverage tracing in Istio in New Relic. Yeah. Yes, sir. You said Jaeger? Yeah, it probably, yeah. Like, so we actually keep all of the metrics turned on locally. We don't send them all to New Relic. So yes, we have all of the built-in tooling still set up locally within the cluster to do short-term troubleshooting. We only send what we need to New Relic because it's a lot of metrics. If you're sending all your byte data, that's a lot. And we don't use some of that for, like we use some of it, but we don't use all of it. So we kind of weigh it out, and then we can turn things on as we need them. So yes, we do have Jaeger locally. We do have Grafana and everything else. Like it's all turned on locally, so we can leverage it within the cluster. We just don't want that egress traffic going to New Relic. Yes. This one here for Apollo. This CRD is out of the box for Argo CD. So yeah, there might be something similar for Flux, but yeah, this is out of the box with Argo CD. You can see up on line number 2. The part here for New Relic, we actually worked on this and helped write the code with the engineer at New Relic who contributed to the public repo. So we were the first people to use this tool because we really needed we had a need for it. So we asked New Relic, we're like, hey, do you guys have anything? And they're like, no, but if you want to write it, we'll help support you. So what Steve was saying before, like we've been a customer for 9 years, and we really have a good relationship with New Relic. We feed off of each other. We constantly are helping support each other in different ways. So this was a perfect example of that. Yes? Yeah, definitely. You can, by using some of the filters I listed off early on, you can actually see what the source, so we do leverage Istio gateway, for example, too. So we would see the source be the gateway, destination be the microservices virtual service, or even the namespace. It's really up to what your use case is and where you want to use that data. You might only want to know the destination namespace because you know what's going to be there. It all depends on your workload. But yeah, using those filters, you can get pretty granular there and you can see what's going on. You can also see gRPC response codes. If you're using gRPC, you can use regular HTTP response codes as well. Any other questions? No? Okay. Thanks everyone so much for joining.